Rhys Trimble, a poet from Wales.
Welcome. A chroeso.
I started making films as a result of the first lockdown, maybe.
A di nid gwenllu mydyr 27 swyn. Eng llwybr dŵr, dŵr tyner, trwch ddŵr, eng dŵr, di mir wir. Does garw belaw nhw seliwr, lle bwys di 11, brawd di bwys.
Da mir wir, dwys gechi belaw di'n diriad, oer glid, yn y blod rwy ti'n anffurfiol blag, bwn silgen di ar lwt, cos un, yn y blod, het neu derin, dau, yn y blod yn pydru, di, wylus, ffwnbri dan y derin, glas i'w lliw dyn fynd lli glaer, rwy ti'n ing dyn fynd lliw gloi derin.
Dwi'n rhythin bach yn wes, cam ser ac alger.
I was going to Lidl. That was my main. That was my main party, and I would bump into somebody who I vaguely knew, and then we cooked up the idea of making films, and then we started making lots of poetry films. So that's one thing, and like everybody else, I sort of developed my Zoom studio sort of space, you know, and did lots of readings on Zoom and all that, you know, where everybody got together, some better microphones and cameras, and started to be concerned about their Zoom credentials. So that happened, and that I just thought, well, this is how it's going to be now, so I've got to adapt to doing performances on Zoom.
Am y llod.
Ruchig, bleiben und Dildo benutzen.
Ja.
Bleiben und Dildos benutzen. Ruhig bleiben und Dildos benutzen.
I found a way of conveying it quite well, because I've got this tendency to push technology to its limits and causes them to break, which is amusing. Especially if you're in the middle of a Zoom call and then you just start to dissolve into the void. You start to pixelate into the void, especially if you, in your passion, kick the router across the room. An invocational doubling. I lawr yr afon, chwith ad chwith, yr awyr afonydd, rhaeadr a sibwll, syberlwch, llifwch, lled a tir a dyddyn, leave and unbetting, pont caravan trousers, spec my tits to wind. My heart to your love, my mind to your body, my body to your body, come to me. Fortress. Yeah, the Zoom equivalent of doing like a mic drop is to just unplug yourself abruptly, I found. People find that quite jarring. So I also do that by just pulling the plug on purpose. Without saying anything. Or this one time when I was doing a book launch and I just sort of disappeared because I stood up and pulled the plug out of the wall. So, and the effect of that is that you just sort of melt into nothingness. I was watching another poet, Edwin Torres, do some good Zoom stuff as well. He would like stick tape on the camera and things like that, like a stick like a gauzy tape over the camera so it all goes blurry, and or like have a little thing over the camera with like a window cut out of it, this sort of thing, which also is an attempt to, I guess, draw attention to the materiality, such as it is, of a Zoom meeting. One thing I did was to get a piano, and I suppose that was something to do with the lockdown, like this idea that I had to get my own equipment because there was no option to use somebody else's piano, I guess. If you remember back to the initial high lockdown, people were quite scared, weren't they, I think. But I got this piano and then I would incorporate that into the performances, so I'd have the laptop where the music goes, and then be on like a meeting where I play the piano. And I would do sort of Facebook Live things where I was just doing crazy piano performances with poetry, and I thought that it would be a good idea to emulate those people who did like a daily performance or something, but because of like neurodiversity and eccentricity or whatever, they went very like random, where I would like accidentally hang up the call 5 times, and then Facebook would start a new video, so there'd be like 5 different random videos on your homepage of different sort of excerpts of the performance. So yeah, there was that. Yeah, so. And I got loads of effects pedals as well. So I started getting more into music, I guess, and I decided I was going to put effects on the voice as well and try and push that And it was an opportunity to explore that kind of performance, the kind of thing that like Hannah Silver does, and which I wanted to explore myself, so it afforded me an opportunity to do that. The piano performances were a purely sort of pandemic thing. I haven't really done performances like that since, because it's quite convenient to have the computer on the piano, so you're sort of like directing the performance into the piano then, which is particularly tailored to that circumstance. So I haven't done that since. That's interesting, isn't it? But perhaps I should go back to it. Also, I was doing like performances with like this American group who I met when I went there, and they're sort of like performance artists, but they're not quite what maybe Europeans would regard as performance art. So I was doing some live stream things with them, and from that the piano performances came out. So I was just like sticking loads of things to the piano and then like playing something, and in which I hold the lettering pedal down and just play lots of big chords and read things at random over that. So that's something that I only did in the pandemic, and I no longer do now. So that was my way of coping with it. Yeah. There was no option of stopping. I mean, and it was the perfect, something that you do alone or whatever was the perfect thing to continue to do during the lockdown, obviously, because you know, everybody had their lockdown baby, didn't they? So this was just like continuing my practice, you know, which is flexible enough that it could take any number of directions, and under any number of circumstances continue in some form. A performance in the building AWN33 for members of my poetry class, and who had travelled from different places to come. So that was very nice to meet them, because it was an online course. Yeah, they were just strangers, you know, from different parts of the UK and other places, and like a good number of them turned up, I think. Let's see, one, Jan, who's a lecturer in Swansea, turned up. Benjamin Cusden, Sarah Juliet Walsh, and they were like from Cornwall and stuff, so that's nice. And Anna was local, of course, but I'd expect her to come, yeah. So we had a fun performance in that building, and then, I mean, I've done like 5 of these courses now, maybe, for the poetry school, and the way it's supposed to, or generally does run, is that people, you know, do the course and then that's it, you know. But yeah, latterly, seem to be able to like engender a certain team spirit, and then people start contacting each other. And I suggested that we make like an anthology of it or something. And then, so two of the local students, like Anna Powell, who's involved very much in the festival, and Lindsay Colburn, who was very much involved, also sort of helped me arrange some sort of anthology of that course in a way. People seem to be quite keen to virtually execute me in different ways. Read into them what you will. So, if you want to go back to the very start, obviously it's like the idea that the two Prestatyn had of making an Eisteddfod in which they use the sword of the Eisteddfod to disembowel the bard rather than to chair the bard, you know. And since we started with this popular pastime of putting me to death as the symbolic bard, obviously the mind then moved to other violent deaths of bardic figures. So I went to like Orpheus then, who is particularly bloodily killed by the Bacchantes, and his head is ripped off, and after death he then becomes like an oracle at Delphi, is it, or something? And obviously there was the parallel then with Bendigeidfran's head staying alive after he's decapitating and becoming some sort of like a muse or a storyteller for the remaining Welsh princes after this story involving Branwen and Matholwch. So we tried to put those two things together. It's quite an idea, and there was supposed to be like a poem written, but I did write some of it, but it sort of got lost in the performance of it. It got a little bit subsumed in the practicalities of staging like a theatrical piece. It was a matter of coordinating a number of different elements, and so it was an idea that I came up with, and in collaboration with Rona Maui developed into something that could be done in a particular place. So just thinking about the theatricality of it, I mean, the newness of it was the fact that it was scripted. And despite my best efforts to properly script a sequence of events, that was sort of going against my own natural inclination to just improvise everything. So what the result was like the battle between scriptedness and unscriptedness, and an attempt to bring other people in. Yeah, so generally, if there's other people involved in my performances, it's either like music, which is static in terms of movement, isn't it? And is focused on making some sort of sounds or music that works in the context. But when you've got people running around, obviously that's a different area. So, and the fact that the audience were known to us all, and that some of the Bacchantes, the witches, were, sort of conscripted at the very last minute. And so the performance and the performers and the audience were, to a lesser or greater degree, one fluid sort of mass of people. Really, it wasn't particularly clear who was doing the performance and who was the audience, because I think the audience felt quite confident to intervene in different ways, and the fact that what was done sort of deviated quite a lot from the plan was also like an invitation, maybe unconsciously, for people to step in. If it's like an exterior location, then obviously the way you interact with it is completely different. Like indoors is very still, isn't it? And outdoors is got a lot of uncontrollable elements. So in Bryn Celli we had like the cows all around us, for one thing. We had the fact that the tumulus was quite far away from where we parked, so we had to do like a pilgrimage in order to get the props and everything to the place, and the audience, and then the audience, it's more like this improvisatory mind that controls a performance outdoors, where people haven't really been drilled to the point where they completely understand the concept or anything like that. So it's the improvisatory mind that has any sort of authorship over the sequence of events, and you only have the power really to curate things at very short notice, really. There is no authorship in terms of like editorial control. the Metamorphosis and the previous one, when was the safari?
August 2020.
Okay, so that was also, you know, a pandemic kind of way of doing the arts, I thought, because it did seem to strip away some aspects of the arts which are a bit self-aggrandizing and sort of the consequence of, you know, very planned, scripted,
Big scale events.
big scale events. For example, go on in Pontio or Gallery, Canarvon, you know, this kind of, it's in a colourful brochure, you know, and everything's completely controlled and scripted. And then we had these two events that were like, contingent on resilience, improvisatory, and sort of the motivations for doing them were like quite hinged on survival, probably more than normal events where like commerce starts to come into it. They seem to be quite like dominated by people who are doing it for the sake of art rather than any other motivation. It seemed to be mainly women, didn't it? And it seemed to be quite efficiently done, you know, but not in this sort of excessively controlled way. And most of the things that those artists involved are doing now probably came out of that time period, so that's, you know, an improvement in a way that, on what was before. Of course, Pontio would not engage with that because they are bound to the still dominant sort of, I guess, neoliberal, whatever, commercial, large-scale arts scene, you know. But despite that, there is a line of development coming out of this period where people were doing things for the sake of it, and like proving that the arts need to be done no matter what the circumstance.